they're not going to like you either because you are firmly in Israel's camp, correct?
People would be leading great lives right now.
Hey everyone, it's David, producer for The Benjamin Dixon Show and Like It or Not. So we're roughly 6 months into Israel's siege and bombardment on Gaza. Over 30,000 Palestinians killed. Estimates that account for those under the rubble say that it could be up to about 50,000 killed. The situation is growing more and more dire. For months, there have been warnings about a famine coming, about the humanitarian crisis turning catastrophic. Palestinians in northern Gaza are eating animal feed. Sacks of bread are selling for thousands of dollars because there's no flour to make anything, and children have begun starving to death. And while this is Israel's doing, much more specifically Benjamin Netanyahu's doing, President Biden is being blamed, and rightfully so, up to a point. There's a lot of people that are turning up the language and criticism saying that he's controlling everything, that Biden could end everything going on in Gaza at the snap of a finger. And that's really not realistic. Biden definitely has blood on his hands because he's supporting Israel and he's continuing to push aid to Israel, military and weapons aid. Not to mention the legislation that would push even more funding and aid to Israel. But just going based on the United States annual aid, I think it's some $3.8 billion annually that we've been sending them for years. That aid alone counts for about 15% of Israel's official defense budget. They definitely spend more than their official budget, but it counts for about 15% of the official budget. If we had stopped the aid, which we should without any question, but if we did stop the aid, it wouldn't stop what Israel is doing. Israel would do it nonetheless. So to put the blame on Biden and paint it as if Biden's controlling everything and telling Israel what to do, it's just not realistic. And there's also people to that same tune that are saying they'd rather vote Biden out and deal with Trump on the issue, which suggests that Trump would somehow be better on Israel than Biden, that Trump would be better and that Trump would be more considerate of the Palestinian people. I would say that's naive, but considering that we have 4 years of Trump's record from his term, plus all the different things that he's said, that he's on record saying about Muslims and Palestinians, it's not really naive. Maybe it's ignorant. If it's not ignorant, it's delusional. We'll stick with ignorant. So I want to play 2 clips for you from Fox News this morning when they spoke to Trump over the phone and asked him about Israel. In this first clip, Brian Kilmeade addresses the pushback and the protests that Biden is facing over his support for Israel and says that while Biden is getting protested, he questions if it would be any different for Trump. And it's really weird when Brian Kilmeade is actually being realistic and not talking out of his but it's Trump's response that really tells us all we need to know.
As you know, this president of the United States, when it comes to Israel, is getting protested. Now he seems to be turning on Israel. But the non-committed vote that Biden's getting, they're not going to like you either because you are firmly in Israel's camp, correct? Are you on board with the way the IDF is taking the fight in Gaza?
You've got to finish the problem. You had a horrible invasion. It took place. It would have never happened if I was president, by the way. As you know, Iran was broke, Brian. They were broke. They had no money for Hamas, for Hezbollah. They were broke. This would have never happened. And for another reason, they wouldn't have done it to me. I guarantee you that. They did this because they have no respect for Biden. And frankly, they got soft. And what happened here is incredible. That should never have happened.
So Trump actually says a lot in his 30 or 40-second response there. The key thing that he said there is you got to finish the problem. What's the problem? Is the problem Hamas? Is the problem Gaza? Is the problem the Palestinian people? This is what Trump does. He leaves things very, very vague. And the next clip is even vaguer. But before we get there, if anyone is doubting that Trump would give full-throated support to Israel, a blanket support, without any questions, without any criticism, you're just ignoring reality. I would go so far as to say that the U.S. would be bombing, not just sending weapons to Israel, we'd actually be bombing in addition to Israel's bombing campaigns. we'd probably have troops in Gaza alongside the IDF. Trump definitely would be antagonizing our enemies, including Iran, and there would be a regional conflict. Now, I know that there's going to be people saying that there already is a regional conflict. No, there's skirmishes, there's been altercations with the Houthis and Hezbollah. That's not a regional conflict. Countries aren't at war. The countries haven't actually responded militarily. It would be a regional inferno and everything would be on fire. I also know that there's going to be people that are echoing and repeating claims that there are U.S. troops in Gaza. And if that's true, it's unacceptable. But there's actually no confirmation of it. It's really all internet rumors. There is a picture of one soldier that I will not show here because it's not verified. There's one picture of a sniper that has both the U.S. flag as well as the Israeli flag on his uniform. Israel allows anyone into their military. They allow foreigners to join their ranks. So there's no clear-cut evidence that we have soldiers in Israel. And up until now, there's no reporting from veritable outlets that that's the case. I've also seen articles floating around from November of 2023 where there were reports that soldiers were sent to help Israel track the hostages. They were sent to Israel, and the articles are very clear that they weren't in Gaza, they were in Israel. This was the same time that the U.S. sent military advisors to speak with Netanyahu's cabinet and try to persuade them against a ground invasion. You might remember that Israel sent them packing back home. The other thing I want to point to is that Trump goes on a rant about how Iran was broke under him and that they would never have been able to, nor would they have done this to him, framing it as if this was done to Biden. So again, let's really face the facts. What was done on October 7th was done in Israel and didn't involve Americans. There are American hostages, but this was something done to Israel. And you can't both suggest that Biden is unfit and not able to be president, he's not able to keep up, and then in the same breath say that he's controlling the situation and dictating to Netanyahu what to do. Furthermore, there's evidence that Trump is ignoring that Netanyahu knew ahead of time about the plot, that Israel, the Israeli government, was aware that something was being planned, and they ignored it. They didn't take it seriously. More specifically, Egypt warned them, and they ignored it. So there's no reason to believe that what took place on October 7th and what's happening now wouldn't be happening if Trump were in office. But let's go to the second clip where Trump is asked whether he would support a ceasefire in Gaza.
It's really the people that surround him. It's the fascists and the communists that surround him. They're making the calls. They're calling the shots. He's not calling the shots.
Mr. President, what did you feel about Kamala Harris calling for a ceasefire in Gaza? Is that something that you support? Is that something that is totally off the table right now for you?
Look, I hate seeing what's happening. Again, it would have never happened. This attack on Israel and likewise Israel's counterattack, which is what it is, would never have happened if I was president. And you know that, Lawrence. This would have never happened. And it's so horrible to watch it because, you know, if things went right in 2020, which they should have, but they didn't for some very bad and sinister reasons, all these people that are dead in Ukraine and Russia and Israel and all these people that are dead, all these areas that are destroyed, people would be leading great lives right now. All of these dead people, much more importantly than the physical, but cities that are just totally wiped out all over the place. We're going to end up in World War III. This is the worst president in history. He makes Jimmy Carter look phenomenal, makes Jimmy Carter look brilliant.
So we'll skip over the obvious that he didn't answer the question. He specifically didn't answer the question, and that was intentional, about whether he supports a ceasefire or not. But what he said towards the end was that all of these people and all the destruction wouldn't be happening. That people and he names Ukraine, he names Russia, he names Israel. He doesn't name Gaza, and he doesn't even mention the Palestinian people. Assuming that when he mentions Israel, he's also including Palestinians. Let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. Assuming that he is, what he said about all of those people was that they'd be living great lives. The Palestinian people would be living great lives. They weren't living great lives before. Regardless of if it was the West Bank or Gaza, they were occupied. They weren't living great lives. They were harassed constantly. They were oppressed. They had shortages of food and medicine before. Nothing like now, but they still had it. There was a blockade in place for Gaza. In the West Bank, their movement was controlled. The occupation and blockade of Gaza has been ongoing for over 16 years. So just to summarize, you do have support from Trump for Israel's campaign in Gaza, their bombardment and bombing and siege of Gaza. He's for that because you have to finish the problem. He doesn't mention the Palestinians at all, and he doesn't say whether he would support a ceasefire, which tells us all we need to know. If you support what Israel's doing and you won't come out and support for a ceasefire, he wouldn't be supporting a ceasefire. He would be telling Israel to keep going, full throttle, full steam ahead. And if you think that he wouldn't be teaming up with Israel and putting us in the thick of it, come on. Now, none of this is a defense of Biden. Biden's handling and approach has been terrible. Not surprising, but terrible. And the truth is that Trump is no friend to the Palestinian people. So if you hear people saying that anything would be better than what we have now, that Trump would somehow be an improvement, especially on this issue, really question their motives and question their sincerity, question if they know what they're talking about. Again, Biden's handling has been problematic, from vetoing ceasefire resolutions in the UN, speaking out of both sides, on one end saying that Israel has to be cautious and careful about civilians, but also saying that Israel has the right to defend itself, not mentioning that the Palestinians have the right to defend themselves. The handling has been terrible, and the US support for Israel, while not surprising in the least, it's a colossal problem. Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And as always, we'll be back with more.